The town of Mariners Hollow had one rule, unwritten but understood: don't mess with Elijah Cross. Not because he was loud. Not because he threw his weight around. But because the quietest man in town often carried the deepest shadows. Every morning before sunrise, Elijah slipped his calloused hands into his old fishing gloves, kissed his daughter on the forehead, and walked down to the docks with a slow, limping gait that barely disturbed the sand. Folks said the ocean respected him. It was the only thing that ever made him smile. He'd retired to this quiet coastal town nearly 10 years ago, after a career that no one fully knew about. Rumors floated around. Some said he was in the Marines, others claimed CIA. But those who'd served recognized that look, steady eyes that had seen too much and never blinked. Elijah never confirmed a thing. His daughter Naomi was 19 and tough in her own way. Smart, fierce, and beautiful in that sun-soaked way coastal girls could be. She worked part-time at a seafood shack on the beach, helped her father mend nets, and dreamed of becoming a marine biologist. Her world was small, but she loved it. Until the bikers came. It was a Tuesday. The sky had gone a strange shade of pewter. Thunderheads loomed far out, but the water was calm. Too calm. Elijah felt it in his bones. Storms didn't always come from the sky. They came on wheels. The Iron Vultures weren't a typical biker gang. Their colors were rust red and gunmetal gray, and their leader Royce Crushermatics had a reputation that reached well beyond state lines. Known for shaking down small towns, extorting businesses, and disappearing before law enforcement could blink. They rolled into Mariners Hollow with engines growling like beasts, tearing up the coastal highway and parking right outside Cora's diner, where Naomi was on her shift. Elijah saw them from his boat. 7 of them. Tattoos, leather cuts, boots stained with road oil. They swaggered into the diner like they owned the world, laughing too loud and staring too long. When Naomi brought them coffee, Royce's hand lingered too close to her hip. "You spill that on me, sweetheart, I'll have to teach you some manners," he said with a grin that showed gold teeth. Naomi didn't flinch. "You don't scare me." That was her mistake. Word traveled fast in small towns. By the time Elijah docked, the whispers were already in the wind. Bikers at Cora's. Trouble brewing. Your girl stood up to them. Elijah didn't rush. He simply walked to the diner, eyes steady, the limp a bit less pronounced than usual. The bell above the door jingled softly as he entered. Naomi saw him first. Relief washed over her face, but there was something else. A flicker of fear she didn't want to show. Royce turned to look at Elijah. "You her daddy or the janitor?" Elijah didn't answer. He simply walked up to Naomi and took her apron from her. "You're off now," he said. "But now." She obeyed. Royce laukit. "Look at that. Papa Bear thinks he's tough." Elijah turned to the man and for the first time, spoke directly to him. "She's my Daukata. You're not welcome here." "Oh yeah." Royce leaned forward, the room now deathly silent. "And who's gonna make us leave, old man?" There was a pause. Elijah's next words came low and even, like a razor sliding from a sheath. "I've buried men who moved quieter than you." Royce blinked. Just once. Then smiled. "We'll be seeing you, old man." They left without another word. But everyone knew it wasn't over. Night fell heavy on Mariners Hollow. Naomi sat on the porch, arms wrapped around her knees, her father beside her in silence. The ocean whispered beyond the dunes, but it brought no comfort. "They're not gone, are they?" she asked. Elijah shook his head. "No. Men like that don't take being embarrassed lightly." Naomi looked at him. "So what do we do?" Elijah's jaw clenched. "We wait. We prepare." Inside the house, behind the worn wallpaper and fishnets, were reminders of a life Naomi had never fully known. A loquet cabinet. A steel trunk. A drawer that never opened. Tonight, they did. He opened the trunk with a small key around his neck. Inside lay a folded tactical vest, a battered sidearm, and a long black knife with the initials EC etched into the handle. He laid each item out like old friends. Naomi starret. "You said you were just in the Navy." "I was." She swallowed. "But you weren't just in the Navy, were you?" He didn't answer. Because he didn't need to. The Iron Vultures returned the next day, louder and meaner. This time they rode in drunk, reeking of gasoline and bourbon, and pulled right up to the dock where Elijah kept his boat. Naomi was helping him load crates of shrimp. Royce swaggered forward with two others.
Hört jure some kind of badas, old man. Seal, hu? Must be real hard killing fish all day.
Elijah didn't look up. I kill what feeds me. You? You just take. That hit a nerve. Royce grabbed a fillet knife from the table and jabbed it into the dock next to Elijah's hand. You think you're scary, huh? No, Elijah said, finally meeting his eyes. But I'm patient. I wait. And when I strike, you never see it coming. Royce spat and laughed it off. But the laugh didn't quite reach his eyes. Later that night, Naomi's car windows were smashed. Someone scrawled "Fish this" across the hood in red spray paint. She screamed. Elijah didn't. He just quietly walked back into the house and locked the door. That was the moment the town knew. He wasn't going to the police. He was going to war. Elijah took Naomi out to the cove the next morning. What are we doing? She asked as he handed her an old M4 rifle, unloaded. Learning. I thought you didn't want me to. I didn't. But that choice is gone now. And for the first time in her life, Naomi saw her father transform, not into a killer, but into a protector trained for war. She learned how to check corners. How to move with cover. How to listen beyond what ears could hear. How do you know where they'll be? She asked. They're animals. They follow scent, instinct. They're loud because they're scared.
Scared of you?
No, Elijah said. Not yet. Elijah knew how to bait a trap. He fixed up the boat like nothing had happened, let it drift out to the inlet where the sun shimmered like fire on water. He left tools visible. Boxes open.
A casual air of distraction.
The iron vultures took it. That night, they returned in force. 10 now, 2 trucks, loud music, howling like jackals. They headed toward the dock, expecting an old man asleep in his shack. What they found instead was silence. Then floodlights. Then smoke. And then pain. Tripwires went off. Flashbangs, not lethal but blinding, sent them stumbling. Elijah moved through the chaos like a ghost in the fog, picking them off one by one.
Knees shattered.
Elbows dislocated. Guns kicked into the bay. Naomi watched from cover, her breath caught in her throat. She had never seen her father like this, fluid, precise, unstoppable.
Royce screamed. You think this is over?
You think this scares me? Elijah stepped from the shadows, blood on his sleeves. Not his. You brought wolves into my home, he said.
Now you return the favor.
The surviving bikers were crawling, stumbling, screaming in pain, but Royce Maddox wasn't one of them. He was gone. Elijah knew what that meant. This was just the first strike, he said, watching the smoke rise above the dock.
He'll come for you now.
Naomi stepped forward, rifle tight in her grip. Then let him.
I'm not scared.
You should be, Elijah said quietly. Because I won't always be able to shield you. But you taught me how to fight. He gave her a look, deep and filled with a father's guilt and pride. I never wanted you to need it.
Admit nicht. Elia woke to the distant sound of a boat engine. Low, fast, and wrong.
He grabbed the scope and scanned the horizon. A speedboat was cutting across the cove toward his dock. Naomi's car was already torched earlier that evening, the last threat before the real kill. But this wasn't a hit squad. It was just Royce. Alone. Stripped of his gang, stripped of his swagger.
Entmet as hell.
He roared up to the dock, shotgun in hand, screaming, "Come on, you old son of a bitch.
Show me what you got."
Elijah was already waiting on the beach, knife at his side, wind slicing through his shirt. No more games, Royce snarled.
You think taking out my crew scares me?
I liked those guys, but I'm better alone. You're weaker alone, Elijah replied. And slower. Royce charged.
The fight wasn't pretty.
It wasn't clean. It was primal.
Royce swung wild. The shotgun cracking once, missed.
Elijah tackled him into the surf.
The waffles hissed as salt and blood mixed.
Royce landed a punch, then another, but Elijah twisted, flipping him over, jamming a knee into his ribs. Then came the blade. Not in Royce's chest. Elijah wasn't there to kill. He pinned the knife to the sand next to Royce's throat and whispered, "You walk out of here breathing. But crawl back, and I'll take that from you too."
Royce kuhet blot, eisweit. Jure in Sahne.
"No," Elijah said.
I'm a Vater.
The sheriff came at dawn. The bikers were zip-tied and lined up like fish at the pier, groaning under makeshift bandages. No one saw what happened. No one asked. Just like no one ever asked what Elijah Cross used to be. The sheriff looked at him long and hard. "You do all this yourself?" Elijah shrugged. Storm hit. Maybe the town oughta invest in better weatherproofing. The sheriff grinned, tipped his hat, and walked away. Naomi stood beside him, arms crossed, face bruised but unbroken. "You think they'll come back?" she asked. "No," Elijah said. "And if they do, they'll remember the cost." He looked out over the water. "I was trained to break people.
But evading I ever protected.
I built with these hands. This home. That's what makes a man dangerous, not what he can destroy, but what he's willing to defend." Naomi slipped her hand into his. And for the first time in weeks, the waves felt peaceful again. If you crave more tales of justice served cold,
If you believe a Quitman carry the loudest thunder,
then you're exactly where you need to be.
Kollisionssymbol subscribe now.
Because the next story drops like a hammer. And trust me, you won't want to miss it. Bell turn on notifications. When the storm comes, you'll be ready. This is more than a story. It's a warning.